In 1916, the Western Front stretched across France, a deadly ribbon of trench networks where young men fought and died amid mud, barbed wire, and the cacophony of artillery fire. Among these soldiers were Edward, Eddie, Carter, and William Davies, two childhood friends from a small rural town in England. Like many others, they joined the war in a wave of patriotic fervor, hoping to be home for Christmas, a hope that was soon shattered by the grim reality of trench warfare. Eddie, only 19, was naive but hopeful, frequently writing home to his older sister Maggie, a schoolteacher deeply protective of her younger brother. Maggie, in her mid-20s, strived to keep Eddie's spirits up through her letters, while juggling her responsibilities on the home front, organizing charity drives and sending care packages to the soldiers. As months wore on, Eddie and Will experienced the brutality of war firsthand. They lost many friends, including one they had grown up with, and Eddie's letters became less frequent and more somber. Despite his attempts to shield Maggie from the worst, she sensed his underlying fear. Will, more cynical from the start, retreated into himself, his diary entries steeped in growing despair and anger at the seemingly senseless loss of young lives. On the German side, Lieutenant Friedrich Müller faced his own challenges. At 30, with a wife and daughter back home, he grappled with the orders he was given and the moral dilemmas of leading his men into danger. His journal entries revealed a man increasingly disillusioned by the war and questioning its purpose. The story reached a turning point during a particularly brutal battle. Eddie and Will found themselves trapped in no man's land, separated from their unit. Finding refuge in a shell crater, they encountered Lieutenant Müller, also stranded. Tensions were high, but the need to survive forged an uneasy truce. Through the harrowing night, they shared stories of their lives before the war, their families, and their hopes for the future. As dawn broke, their respective units found them, shattering their moment of camaraderie. Müller, in a final act of humanity, gave Eddie a photograph of his family, asking him to remember that the enemy was not so different. Eddie and Will returned to their trench, sustaining injuries along the way. Eddie was evacuated to a field hospital, where Rose Miller, a young nurse, took care of him. She read the letter he had intended to finish for Maggie and promised to send it along with her own note explaining what had happened. Will, emotionally broken and physically scarred, returned to the front, uncertain if he would ever see Eddie again. Maggie received Eddie's final letter and Rose's note. Devastated, she read about the horrors her brother endured and the unexpected bond he formed with a German officer. In an act of reconciliation, she visited a war memorial, placing Müller's photograph there as a gesture of remembrance for all who suffered in the war.